Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Are you neurodivergent and dealing with stress or an anxiety? Well, my next guest, Jennifer Mazur, is a anxiety and stress coach for those who are neurodivergent. We're going to sit back and talk to her and find out how she deals with it and how she helps those who have anxiety and stress. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage, and I'll see you on the other side. See you there. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Today I'm joined with Jennifer Mazur, who is a anxiety coach to help teens and preteens with anxiety and stress. Welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am an American citizen, but I've been living abroad in Europe for over 20 years already, which blows my mind because my initial plan was 2 years and to just travel around Europe. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And I've been here ever since. What else? Let's see. I have changed many careers over my life or over my adult life. Always working with things on the creativity end of the spectrum, I suppose. But I realized at quite an early age that working in a corporate environment was not really for me with my different diagnoses, and realized somewhat recently that as a single mother, I've been a single mother for about 10 years, until somewhat recently, and I have my own diagnoses that I really struggle with, and then having a daughter that is feeling the same way, I realized that I could help other kids, other parents that are struggling. And so I left the corporate environment to start doing, something on my own that I felt was more aligned with my life and what I wanted to do and help other people with. And yeah, I guess that's me in a nutshell.
All right, so when were you diagnosed?
That's that's really tough. I wasn't diagnosed officially until I was 40 years old, which was a really late diagnosis. I was always, well, I did have a diagnosis of depression from a very young age. I think 14 or 15, I received a diagnosis for depression, but ADD was not until I was 40, and which made growing up really challenging.
All right, so now is your daughter diagnosed with ADD or ADHD?
She is. She's like my carbon copy. She has all of the same diagnoses as I have, which is, well, we both have ADD, depression, general anxiety disorder. And there's probably quite a few more, but I decided I didn't need any more of a report card. I was done with the diagnosis. I am who I am. She is who she is.
All right, so you work with kids with stress and anxiety. What kind of tools do you use to help them out?
Well, the most important tools that I use are things that are not necessarily things that you would get from a doctor or from the medical system in general. One thing that I found is that in my own life, and this is from, even being a teenager, as well as what I see today, is the doctors or the medical society in general is very quick to just prescribe a pill and then leave things at that. And what I do, by no means does it replace any sort of medication that might be necessary or anything that you need from healthcare. But I rather look at the things that I do as kind of a supplement. And the things that I work with are the things that I've used my entire lifetime for myself without even realizing what was happening in my brain. These were just things that made me feel like I could get through the day and I could cope with life in general. So, as I said, I'm very creative. So there's a lot of art that I do. I call it mindful art because when I'm working with people that, have a different type of diagnosis, whether it's something that they have an official diagnosis for, or whether it's just a suspected diagnosis, I think it's really, really important to show them the power of using their brains creatively. And a lot of people can get caught up on the fact that they're not creative, or they're not skilled, they're bad at art, so on and so forth. I've heard it all. But when you're doing mindful art, the idea is to get really kind of, I'm trying to think of now I'm hearing Swedish in my head, sucked into, but that you wouldn't say that. I guess just get absorbed in the whole process, rather than the outcome. And so when I'm doing mindful art with people, it's very, very similar to a normal mindfulness practice where you're going to be paying attention to everything that's around you, the sounds, the smells, all of your senses. And part of it can be, moving your pen, or making brush strokes with a paintbrush, and really, really focusing on the moment and getting in contact with your actual feelings rather than thinking about something in the past, thinking about something in the future. Some of the other things that I use with people are, well, other mindfulness practices, but also a lot of meditation, and different things like working with gratitude, journaling, as we were talking about a little bit earlier. Lots of different things that can help, in addition to the traditional healthcare system, because they're things that are really easily accessible, things that even if you spend 10 minutes a day doing, they're not going to solve all of our issues. They're not going to get rid of anxiety forever, but they are forever, as in, you're never going to have anxiety again. But the idea is to kind of develop some tools that you can use over time. And even if they only work when you're in the moment, that's still 10 minutes a day that you're not feeling anxious or depressed, or, any of these big emotions, where you can just focus on yourself and bring yourself down a level. So, yeah.
Where do you see the most stress and anxiety coming from in teens and preteens?
Oh gosh. I think a lot of it is general social anxiety, because I'm working with a lot of people that are dealing with, depression, autism, ADD, bipolar disorder. A lot of it has to do with society's expectations of them and feeling different in different situations. So a lot of them have a lot of anxiety when it comes to school, when it comes to general interaction with other teenagers or people in their peer group. A lot of things about change. I mean, when, for example, with COVID, being at school at home and then suddenly turning things around and having to be back in a classroom environment again. I think a lot of the anxiety triggers are fairly similar to what neurotypical teenagers would have, but on a much bigger level, I think, and definitely a bigger level, and I think more common, or the situations happen a bit more often, I suppose. Yeah.
What do you see is the number one thing most people stress about?
Oh, gosh, that's tough. I mean, something that I see quite often, the pressures at school, I
Mm-hmm.
think. Not only the social aspects of school, but the academic pressures that we feel at school. Um, that's really common. That's something that I'm seeing a lot. And I'm trying to think, I don't think that's anything that's really changed over time with COVID. But I think it's just something that's very common the older kids get when there's such a focus on, how your grades are going to be in high school. How are you going to be able to get into college? What are you going to do for the rest of your life? A lot of pressure, and it causes a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, rather
Right.
than just kind of focusing on what's happening right now and enjoying life as much as we can in the moment.
And what have you taught yourself to help you with your own anxieties?
Yeah, that's tough. That's really, really tough. And that's where everything has come from, all these tools that I use. Of course, I still feel anxiety. Yesterday is a perfect example of that. I had an absolutely horrible day yesterday, a very high anxiety day. Um, what I did is I realized I had to remove myself from the situation physically. So I did. I took some time where we had a party basically at the house because my stepson, or bonus son, as we say here, was graduating. So we had lots of people over. It became very high anxiety for me. Everybody was outside in the garden, and I actually had to come inside and take a little bit of time for myself. And I did some breathing exercises. And it took a little while. I think I was away for about 20 minutes or something before I finally felt I can handle this, and went outside and joined everybody again. But I do have my practices for every day. I've learned a lot of breathing exercises, for example, that I can do when I start to feel this anxiousness.
Mm.
Um, or every day I have a practice where I do meditate every single day. I do journal every single day, and I try to do something creative. And it doesn't have to. I've got some um, well, I've got a book here, but I guess you can't see it, so it doesn't really matter. But sometimes I'll just take like a pen and just make, dots in different patterns, or just scribble on a page if I'm feeling really angry, or just anything to kind of get it out of my body and be able to then focus on something else.
Okay. What do you see as most common in adults who have an anxiety, and what do you think brings it up?
Oh, I think it's the same things. I think because as kids and teenagers, we have these anxieties and we're not taught to learn how to deal with them. The same anxieties are still there when we're adults. It just changes. Some of the triggers will change. So instead of it being school, it's work, it's a career. Instead of being afraid of asking questions to a teacher, we don't want to ask questions in a team meeting, or if we're asked to do a presentation, that can cause a lot of anxiety. Same things, going to parties, being in new situations, having to take care of clients, or I think it's all the same things. It's just grown with us. And
Hmm.
the ways to deal with these anxieties are basically the same. You can use the same tools. It's just the earlier we learn the tools, the easier it is to actually use them. And
Hmm.
that's one thing that I find a lot of people don't realize. You can't use a tool in the moment if you don't know how to actually use it. So the idea is to start using and developing these tools when we're feeling fine. So that when we come to a situation where we feel like we're going to have an anxiety attack, you can automatically use these breathing tools, for example, if you're out in public, without even really having to think about them. So you've already kind of perfected them and you know it's going to work, instead of thinking like, oh, am I supposed to breathe in for 5 seconds, or is it out for 8 seconds? Or because that's going to cause even more anxiety.
All right. How does Sweden treat those who are neurotypical?
Yeah. Oh, typical or diverse?
Diverse.
Diverse. Not as well as they should, I think. I mean, from the work that I do, I would say 99% of the work that I do is online. And I do that mainly because living in Sweden, it's such a small place, and I like to work in English since that's my, my mother tongue or whatever. One thing that I have found in Sweden, being um, neurodiverse myself, and then with my daughter being neurodiverse, they don't do enough. For me, when I was diagnosed, because I was 40 years old, I was basically told that I wasn't eligible for any assistance or any help, any therapy, anything whatsoever, because I was quote unquote too old. The only thing that I was eligible for was to meet with a psychiatrist for medication. With my daughter, because I'm trying to think how old she was maybe 9. Yeah, 9 when she first received a diagnosis. She, of course, was able to see a psychiatrist. We did not go with medication. In the beginning, she is on medication now. But we tried to take different routes and try and navigate a little bit. I think in the US, it's called an IEP
Hmm.
that you can receive at school. And they have
Yes.
something similar here that people are entitled to, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the school is going to follow the rules. So we are in constant battles and constant struggles with the school system, the education system, um, because I don't feel that there are enough adaptations that are put into place for kids, teenagers, students, even adults that have a different kind of diagnosis. And that's if you're going through the private, or excuse me, public route. If you're going through the public route, of course, anything's available if you have the money for it. You can
Hmm.
get as much help as you want, but most people are not in that situation. So I think, Sweden claims to be a place where, there's no sort of discrimination, or they're gonna be fair to everybody. But I think, like so many other countries, it's just not the way it is. There's still a bit of a stigma attached. Definitely a stigma attached when it comes to a social level, but when it comes to even the way healthcare and the education system is treating things, I think there's a lot of room for improvement.
All right. Now, do you see a pattern with preteens and teens when it comes to anxiety and stress?
Mm, well, I think a pattern. I think the biggest thing would be just that things can get worse over time if they don't learn these skills. These anxieties are going to follow. Or it's not even the anxieties, because we're never going to make the anxiety disappear. We don't want the anxiety to disappear. It's there for a reason. But we do want to be able to control our response to the anxiety and how we deal with it. But as far as patterns, I mean, I think it's just kind of nothing specific that I can think of, really. It's just that once we develop these specific particular anxieties that we feel, they do tend to stay with us as we grow up, just shifting a little bit, and either how they present or what the actual triggers are, but
Hmm.
they're always very similar to how they started.
All right. And how do you deal with people with stress? Because I know stress is a huge factor in a lot of people, and everyone has different levels of stress. How do you tackle that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to listen to yourself and to catch yourself in time. So when you start to feel like things are too much, we have to, number one, be okay with admitting to ourselves that it is okay. We don't have to be superhuman. If something is stressing us out, we need to acknowledge that, take a step back. Um, Look at things from a different perspective. For example, think about it. Try and remove ourselves from the situation. What would I say to my best friend if she was telling me this is the way she would feel? I wouldn't tell her, keep going, you can do it, you can get through this. I would listen to her and try to empathize with her and tell her, you need to listen to yourself. If you need a break, take a break. If you you know. So I think the most important thing is that we listen to ourselves. We try and reduce whatever it is that's causing the stress, because the better we feel, the better we're going to be able to handle the situations going forward. But if we just press ourselves through them, it's going to lead to burnout, or, you know, it just has very negative
Mm-hmm.
reactions.
All right. Who seems to open up to you more, preteens or teens?
I think preteens. I think preteens are a little bit easier. Teens are a little bit more shielded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think definitely preteens are more, yeah, are definitely more open to begin with. I mean, of course, it depends from individual to individual, but if I'm looking at a general, if I'm generalizing, it would be preteens.
All right. What's a typical day like for you?
Oh, goodness. Um, well, I have noticed my own limitations, so I try and only work for 4 hours a day. Because I know once I hit that point, I'm just totally stressed out, overwhelmed, and then I'm not getting anything done. So the typical day for me would basically, I wake up and I do a morning meditation. Then it's this time of year where it's really, really nice in Sweden. And in the summertime, I'll go outside and drink my coffee and just kind of take it very, very easy in the morning. Then I'll work for a few hours, because I know that's when I'm that's when I'm the most productive, is early in the morning or late in the evenings. So if when I'm working with clients, or if I have a class, I'll tend to do them in the evenings, after school for kids, or on the weekends if they're open to that. So yeah, a few hours of working, whether it's doing you know, things behind the scenes, or things firsthand with other people. And then what else? Just a normal day doing the things that we tend to do, and then I try to do some art as well, because that's something that I feel I need to do to balance myself. And then just spend the evenings with my family, and then another quick meditation before I go to bed. A little bit of journaling about, you know, how my day went, and also planning for the next day as well. So when I wake up the next morning, I don't feel completely stressed because I have no idea of what to expect for the day. So
All right. Do you work differently with adults than you do with teens and preteens?
I think it's pretty much the routines are the same, or that the tools are the same. I think the way that you approach things might be differently. With teens, it can take a bit more of um, convincing that this is going to help. Whereas usually, because usually it's their parents that come to me, it's not the teens themselves. Whereas when it's adults that come to me, they're already sold on the idea. I mean, they're ready to go, so they're a lot more open. So you can, in some ways, you can get things done a bit faster. You can get into the meat of it with adults faster than kids. But I have to say that I find working with kids to be a lot more rewarding to myself personally.
All right. Now I understand you've written a book,
A journal.
a journal. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I've just released a journal. I do plan on writing a book one of these days, but not quite yet. But yeah, I just released a journal this week. It's a bit of a different approach to an anxiety journal. It is created specifically for kids that are yeah, that are neurodiverse, neurodivergent. Yeah, for them to work with another teenager. So two kids together, good friends. The whole idea is that they are creating and nurturing their bond together and building a bit of a cheerleading session.
Mm-hmm.
So they are yeah, going through different things that not only things that cause anxiety, but working on the tools and the skills to help them against the anxiety that they're building. And one of the reasons I do it with the teens together is to kind of, build each other up. Um, if there's things that you can't find about yourself that are super positive, then maybe your best friend can help you find things. And it's a really fun approach. So, some of the things, for example, one of the activities is to make like a playlist on Spotify or whatever music thing that you're using, kind of like I did back in the 80s and the 90s, to make a playlist for one of my best friends when you want to build them up. So it's a lot of encouraging exercises that kids can do together, teenage or even adults could do it, really, to keep in their toolkit for when they're feeling really bad, and ways to help them feel better with their anxiety.
It's really good because a lot of kids I know out there are struggling to figure out who to trust, who not to trust as a friend. And if you can get that right friend to do the workbook with you,
Yeah.
it can mean everything and it can mean nothing. You
Yeah.
could strike gold and you can find out, hey, this person could be my best friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think yeah, it's a great way to dig deeper, build some empathy as well, learn things about your friend, as well as, learning and discovering things about yourself as well in a different way.
Hmm.
You're not only working on yourself, you have somebody there doing it alongside with you, which can be gold.
Yeah, it can be because you you only know yourself to a point
Mm,
where everyone else sees you in a different light, and this shit opens up that book to your soul because if they're a true friend, they see beyond your interior,
yeah.
and they see the exterior. The reverse that, they see beyond your exterior and they see your interior, and they can see that you're a genuine person.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the exercises that I did, and I've taken this into the journal as well. It was probably in my early 20s, and I was reading a general self-help book on happiness. And one of the activities was to ask three different friends or something to write a letter to you about the qualities that they really admire. And that was eye-opening. I mean, I remember sitting there and reading the letters with tears streaming down my face, because I didn't realize these things about myself. And it was so beautiful to have somebody else telling me these
Hmm.
things. And then I could reflect on them and say, I am really good at that. Things I had never acknowledged before. And so I wanted to bring that to the journal as well, because that can be such a powerful thing.
And finally, where can people find out more about you?
Oh, goodness. So my website is called jenniferlearning.com. It is a work in progress, but the book can be found at jenniferlearning.com/workbook. Um, I also have, one of the things I want to say is that because I spent 10 years as a single mom, and because I know resources in a lot of places are limited, one of the things that's most important to me is making things accessible to everybody. So while I do have some products and some things that I sell, I also have some very, very, well, everything that I have is low cost because I do want to make it available, but I have lots of free resources there as well. Um, I definitely recommend the workbook. It's brand new, it's digital, so you can download it, and the kids can get working on it straight away. I also have a really cool workshop coming up next month that people can get on a waiting list for, and that's all about breathing intentionally. So different breathing exercises for anxiety. Hopefully in time before, I mean, the idea is to get it out to people before kids go back to school so they have the tools available. But yeah, jenniferlearning.com is where you can find me.
And I'll leave a link in the description down below. And
Yeah.
that's it, everyone. That was Jennifer Murids. I'll see you on the next one. See you there, everybody.